Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of Monday, April 12th, 2021. And let's see, it is 6:33 p.m. on Monday evening. We call the meeting to order. And Jingbo, if you'd like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. Okay, is Jackie here, or who's going to handle the roll call?
Jackie, are you? This is Senior Planner Chen. I can do the roll call.
Okay.
Chair Corwetter.
Yep.
Vice Chair Liu.
Here.
Commissioner Horace.
He is here, but seems to be having some audio issues.
Okay. Commissioner Mandapakar. He is
excused.
And Commissioner Schwartz.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Tonight's meeting is live streamed on cable channel 3 on the San Gabriel City platforms. If you have any comments, please email them to pc-publiccomment@sgch.org no later than the time that we'd be discussing that item. Comments received after the items have been considered will not be read into the record. Comments will be read by Assistant Jackie Wong, or Matt in this case, for up to 3 minutes each. So we do have a time limit on those. And also he will be addressing the agenda items. Okay, Sam, you want to talk about the public comment?
Yes, Chairman and members of the Commission. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Planning Commission cannot answer any questions or take any action until such time as the matter may appear as an item on a future agenda.
Okay, do we have any comments? Have we received anything?
This is Senior Planner Matt Chen speaking. I just confirmed with Jackie. We don't have any public comments at this point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so our first item tonight is going to be the Housing Element Outreach Workshop. And Samantha is going to be providing background on this item. Samantha, you have the floor.
Yes, Chairman and members of the Commission. Item 2 is a presentation item. It is the first of multiple community workshops that will be held for the Housing Element Update Project. Every year, planning staff provides an update on the progress of the general plan and housing element to the Planning Commission and City Council, and reports the updated information to the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, and the Office of Planning and Research, which is OPR. And every 8 years, state housing laws require local jurisdictions to update their housing element. The current housing element planned is for the years between 2013 through 2021, and 2021 starts the next housing cycle for the planning period between 2021 and 2029. In preparation for this project, the city made SB2 and LEAP grant funding applications to HCD and was awarded funding in 2020. Subsequently, staff issued a request for a proposal, or an RFP, to work on the city's housing element update, along with other housing programs that will be presented to the Planning Commission and City Council later this year. The RFP was issued to 20 firms and 3 proposals were received. Lisa Wise Consulting, Inc., or LWC, was selected based on their proposal, experience, and qualifications, including successful experience drafting housing elements and other housing-related documents, which LWC will get into a little bit more in their presentation. This evening, Lisa Wise Consulting will be providing an introduction to the Housing Element Update Project Presenting on behalf of LWC and its team is Jennifer Murillo.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Glad to be here tonight. I'm Jen Murillo with LWC, and I'm here with my colleagues, David Bergman and Karen Nguyen. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. Thank you. So tonight, we're providing background to set the stage for the update to the city's housing element. We'll cover some basics and new laws that apply to housing elements. Then we'll talk about what affordable housing is and some specific housing conditions in San Gabriel. Lastly, we'll discuss the regional housing needs allocation. And I'm planning to keep the presentation to about 15 minutes, then we can open it up for questions and comments. Next slide. So a little bit about who we are. Next slide. Lisa Wise Consulting is a land use planning and economics firm founded in 2006. We're headquartered in San Luis Obispo with offices in LA and San Francisco. A lot of our work focuses on the intersection of land use planning and economics, which is where housing elements more or less reside. And our core capabilities, in addition to housing elements, housing policy, anti-displacement research, includes zoning codes, form-based codes, objective design standards, market studies, financial feasibility analyses, and implementation work. So we really enjoy and focus on this combination of economic strategies with land use planning and development work. Next slide, please. And we've worked on 30 housing element updates over the past 3 cycles. So we're currently working on 8 housing element updates, with 5 of those in the Southern California region. And that includes housing element updates for large cities, very large cities like Long Beach, and also small to medium-sized cities. And we're also working in the San Gabriel Valley on your neighbors, Temple City's housing element update right now. Next slide, please. So we wanted to get into some basics, as this is the first outreach workshop on the housing element update. We wanted to get a little 101 on housing elements. So next slide, please. Housing elements are subject to state housing law. We're working within the framework established by the state when we're talking about housing elements. And state law requires jurisdictions to plan for housing and plan for their fair share of housing. And that's housing at different affordability levels. Now, state law does not require cities to build new housing, but cities must plan to accommodate adequate housing capacity through their zoning. Next slide, please. The housing element is one of the state mandated elements of your general plan. But unlike the other elements, a housing element must be updated every 8 years, and it must be certified by the state. So the Housing and Community Development Department of the state must review and approve or certify your housing element. And by law, housing elements must include an assessment of the local housing needs and existing housing stock. They must show how the allocated housing need at all income levels is accommodated in the city. And it must set a housing action plan, so goals, policies, and programs the city will implement over the next 8 years. Next slide. And specifically, these items are called out in state law. So a review of the city's current housing element policies and programs. Samantha referred to this, that every year you are looking at a progress report of your general plan and housing element programs. This is a thorough review of where those policies and programs are in terms of implementation, what's working and should be continued, what's not working, or what has been completed and doesn't need to be continued. We also look at the housing needs assessment that examines demographic, employment, and housing trends and conditions. And attention here is paid to special need populations, large families, seniors, people with disabilities, assessing their needs and data to help understand what policies or programs might be effective to assist those populations. A critical component is your site's inventory. This is a list of each available parcel and site suitable for accommodating housing by specific affordability levels within the city. Also, an identification of housing resources. So resources that support the development, preservation, and rehabilitation of housing. We also look at constraints. So those are both governmental constraints, like zoning and permit procedures, and non-governmental constraints, like market conditions or environmental factors that may constrain housing development in San Gabriel. And lastly, the implementation plan. Again, this is your action plan over the next 8 years that fulfills the needs that have been identified or addresses constraints identified in the technical analysis. Next slide. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the housing element is a requirement of state law. And since your current housing element was adopted in 2013, there has been a significant amount of state legislation passed that will apply to this housing element update. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to highlight a few, and I'm sure we can make these slides available if you want to look more closely into any of these. Next slide, please. AB 1397 relates to the housing sites inventory, and it applies more scrutiny to which sites a city can include and identify as a housing site. For example, a site that isn't vacant must have realistic development potential. For instance, it can't be locked into a long-term lease that might preclude the development of housing over the next 8 years. And the inclusion of larger sites, 10 acres or larger, or smaller sites, less than half an acre, for lower income housing may be included only if they can be supported by a history of affordable housing development on sites of that size in San Gabriel. And SB 166, no net loss, requires city to maintain that adequate sites throughout the 8-year planning period. So from 2021 through 2029. This means that if a site in the site's inventory is developed with a lower number of affordable units than has been identified in the site's inventory, then other sites are available to accommodate those units. So at no time during those 8 years do you have insufficient sites to accommodate your remaining housing allocation. Next slide, please. AB 686 requires addressing affirmatively furthering fair housing through the housing element. And this is to ensure inclusive, not segregated communities. So for example, this will be analyzed when looking at potential lower income sites and where they're located and dispersed throughout the city. The state with AB 72 has increased its reach with enforcing housing element compliance. So the state, or HCD, can revoke a city's housing element compliance status depending on the city's action or inaction. So this can potentially threaten certain state funding received by the city or subject the city to state lawsuits. Next slide. And so now we'll get into the process to update the city's housing element in compliance with state requirements. Next slide. So we've been working closely with city staff to kick off the housing element update, and the technical assessment is underway. This is our first community meeting, so thank you very much for participating. We plan to have another public meeting next month where we can discuss the preliminary report. And the preliminary report consists of the technical analyses that supports and informs the policies and programs in the housing element. So it's a look at the initial analysis and data behind what will turn into policies and programs. So we're targeting that in May. And following the input and discussion there and our continued analysis, we will prepare a draft housing element. And we're targeting August for that. And we'll hold additional public meetings to discuss the draft housing element in the August-September timeframe. And during that time, the state will also review the draft housing element. And with the feedback that we receive from the community and from the state, we'll revise the housing element and bring that forward to you, to Planning Commission, at a hearing for recommendation to council, and then to council for adoption. And following council adoption, pass along that final version for state certification. And we're looking at having those hearings at the end of the year, November and December. Next slide, please. So let's define what we mean when we talk about affordable housing here. Next slide. So in relation to the housing element, affordable housing is specifically defined by federal and state government. So affordable income categories are based on the percentage of area median income, or AMI, of LA County. And the incomes for a family of four within each of these categories, extremely low, very low, low and moderate income, are shown here for reference. And housing is considered affordable if it costs no more than 30% of income. Next slide, please. And affordable housing can be provided in a variety of ways. Deed restrictions, for example, can cap sales prices to those with qualifying incomes. Supportive housing can house those with special needs. Public housing is owned and operated by the government, and it's the least common. Rent stabilization can control rental price, and there are rent subsidies, such as through the Section 8 voucher program. So variety of options for ways that affordable housing can be accommodated and provided. Next slide, please. And so let's briefly hit on some key housing conditions in San Gabriel. Next slide. So while San Gabriel's population has grown over time, continuing to place demand on housing, it is increasing at a slower rate than the region. And when we talk about region, in this case, we're talking about the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG region. Next slide. The most common household size in the city is 2 people at 27.5%, followed by 3 people at almost 24%. And this is important when considering the mix of housing types and sizes. Almost half of the city's housing stock is 3-bedroom units or larger, so that's reflective of the lower share of single-person households in San Gabriel compared to the region. Next slide. And San Gabriel has a higher share of renters. at about 55% compared to the region at less than 48%. And I'll discuss this later, but renters tend to experience a higher degree of housing problems, which we'll talk about later. Next slide. So for example, well, overcrowding is considered to be a unit in which more than one person occupies a room, and severely overcrowded when more than 1.5 persons occupy a room. That's exclusive of bathrooms and kitchens. And overcrowding is often a function of financial constraints. And renter-occupied units are more likely to be overcrowded than owner-occupied units, and that's consistent locally and regionally. However, in San Gabriel, owner-occupied units actually experience a higher rate of overcrowding compared to the region. So next slide, please. And in terms of cost burdened, in San Gabriel, nearly 6 out of 10 renters are cost burdened. And by that, we mean they're spending more than 30% of that income on rent, an important affordability threshold there. And almost 32% are considered severely cost burdened, meaning they're spending more than half of their income on rent. And these rates of overpayment are slightly higher than the region. Next slide. And as is expected, of those renting in the city, lower income households spend significantly more of their income on rent. So most of those earning less than $35,000 spend more than 50% of their income on rent, while higher income households spend closer to 20% of their income on rent. Next slide. Historically, housing permits in the city have largely been for single-family homes. And here you can see on the trend lines there, you've got SCAG, so the region in black, and San Gabriel in golden there. And so San Gabriel also issues fewer housing permits on a per population basis compared to the region. Not uncommon for built out community, but still an important measurement for reference. Next slide, please. So when we start looking at land within the city where housing, particularly affordable housing, could be located, we review allowable uses and densities contained in the zoning code as well as specific plans. And here is the zoning map covering the central portion of San Gabriel, and just wanted to point out some zones that are relevant here. So the R3 zone in brown, that zone has a maximum density of 25 units per acre. The commercial zones, C1 and C3, we have here in red and purple along some major corridors, also allows a maximum density of 25 units per acre. And as we get into the Mission District specific plan, so the area around the Mission, of course, we have the R3A zone, that's the brown with black dots there. That allows up to 40 units per acre, so a higher density there. And some of the other zones in the Mission District specific plan allow mixed use, like the C1M, C3M, MD, GMD zones. Those allow mixed use up to 40 feet. So those are some areas that we would consider when we're starting to look for sites to accommodate affordable housing. Next slide, please. Oh, apologies. I didn't know we'd have this pop up. You can click through the highlights there. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, so you can go ahead and click through this as well to load up those. Thank you so much. So in the southern portion of San Gabriel, here we also have the zoning map uploaded here. And similarly, we have those same zones, the R3, C1, and C3 zones again. Those are the dark brown and red and purple that allow up to 25 units per acre. And then the Valley Boulevard specific plan here along Valley Boulevard, we have zones that allow up to 5 stories for mixed use. That's the MUT zone in violet here and the MUC zone in olive green. This Valley Boulevard specific plan also has zones that allow for up to 40 units per acre. So the MUCR zone in light pink and the MFR zone, the orange and white stripes there. Again, areas that we would consider for accommodating the density we would be looking for lower income affordable housing. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Lastly, I'll talk about the regional housing needs allocation, or the RHNA. And every jurisdiction in the state receives a target number of units at the various affordability levels to plan for. That's the RHNA. And the state first determines the number on a regional basis. And then those units are assigned to each jurisdiction by the regional planning organization. And it's SCAG in this case, as I've mentioned. And the final RHNA assigned to jurisdictions by SCAG was approved by HCD towards the end of last month. So these numbers have been confirmed. And for this housing element cycle, RHNA has increased across the state. The city's last RHNA was 930 units, and this time it is 3,023 units. Of those units, about 1,730, or about 57%, are moderate income and below. So looking at for moderate income, low income, very low income, that's about 1,730 units. About 1,300 units, or 43%, are above market units or market rate units. And the housing element sites inventory must show that the RHNA can be accommodated within the city. Next slide, please. So the housing element update will help the city meet these RHNA objectives through the identification of suitable sites, which can also include projects that have been approved but not yet constructed. Additionally, it can include accessory dwelling units. And then, furthermore, policies and programs in the housing element will look at ways of continuing the city's efforts to encourage housing development, and other potential policies and programs to address any identified housing need that may not be met with current programs and policies. Next slide, please. Let's see. Okay, with that, I'll wrap up so we can get into questions or comments. Next slide. So to stay informed and involved throughout this project, please see the city's project webpage for the housing element. That link is here, as well as Samantha's contact. So feel free to reach out to her. And then the next item to watch for is this preliminary report, which should be available next month. Again, that is summarizing the key findings from the technical analysis that will inform the development of housing element policies and programs, and we will have a public meeting to discuss that. So keep an eye out for that. And next slide. So thank you very much. We're really excited to be working with the city, and we look forward to any questions or comments. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Do we have any comments or questions by the commission?
Oh, I'll make a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Housing issues obviously is a very urgent issue. So I've been just happened to be very focused on, interested into these issues for the past 10 years. So I have a lot of thinking put thought into it, and I'm glad that the city are looking into it. But there's also various ways of achieve the housing goal by set by the state. So I just want to keep the mind open and to find a appropriate way fit to the characteristic of San Gabriel. How do we achieve that demand, and how can we meet that demand? So I'm optimistic to see how it's coming up, and hopefully the staff and the consultants will provide a really productive and encouraging work. Thank you.
Thanks, Jingbo. Jerry, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I agree with Jingbo. I think it's important. And the affordable housing part of this is something we've discussed before. And so seeing how it's going to be evolve in the plan is really critical. And whether or not the council is going to create any kind of affordable housing incentives or programs, I think is to be determined. But I'm excited to see this process underway, and I too will look forward to seeing what the preliminary report says and future aspects of this process.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Jerry. Mark, are you with us?
Yes. Of course, I turn my computer on and it decides it wants to do a major update. So that was fun.
Perfect.
Anyway, a question for the presenter. And I don't know if this was in the scope of your analysis or not, but do we have projected population based on full build out? In other words, development to the fullest potential of present zoning multiplied by the 3.1 or whatever it is per housing unit, or average housing units, both with traditional and then factoring in ADU. I know that's a lot. Your answer might be just no, but do you have any numbers in terms of population at full build out, I guess is my question.
We don't have those numbers tonight. As we start looking at the site inventory, we're going to start to make some of those projections and assumptions as to what sites may be appropriate to accommodate housing. So looking at the remaining capacity in the city is essentially part of that effort. But it's not exactly looking at like what you might look at as, a general plan full build out, but it's sort of within that realm.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to point out is that there is a parallel Sql process. So this is a discretionary act like any other. So the Sql process will disclose potential impacts on the physical environment. And of course, the general plan and the housing element all have to be consistent with one another. So
I find it helpful to know what we're really signing up for in terms of population. Okay, and that's easily projected when you factor in what is the building potential of underdeveloped parcels times the likely occupancy. And sometimes it's a little shocking. Okay, I know in my previous commissioner's life, when that was projected, and it was projected to be 150,000 people, people took notice. So I'm on board on this, us meeting our assigned goals, which may or may not be realistic depending on your perspective, and I'm sure it's going to happen. But if we know what we're up against, I think we might make it happen in a way would be different than if we did not really know what we're signing up for in terms of total population. And so it's really a question of let's do it in a quality manner that takes into account property owners, businesses, and residents. That's all I was getting at. So maybe at some point in the future, if we could get that and see what kind of population we may be signing up for, that could help guide us. Is all would be. That's what I would request anyway.
Okay, good points, Mark. Actually, I've got a couple of points on this, and I was surprised to see how steady the population has been in the city of San Gabriel over the last 20 years. You know, I've been here a lot longer than that, and with the density that I see being presented and built, I would have thought that number was going to be a lot larger. And in fact, in some cases, it's gone down. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but anyway, that's just a personal observation. The other thing is just from an inventory standpoint, San Gabriel has always been a challenge. You know, we're one of the oldest cities in the region. We are the oldest city in the region, maybe not incorporated, but we certainly had a mission before anybody else. So I'm going to go with that. And you know, I just think you know, when you're looking at development and you're looking at numbers and you're looking at population and increasing and accommodating all this, it's very difficult in an infill community. You know, I can't think of one piece of open land that has never been developed in the city. You know, if it's open, something got torn down. So anyway, I think we need to be sensitive to some of that. I also think I like the focus on getting some affordable housing into the region. Boy, I just don't know how you survive if you don't house everybody who needs to work here. So that's something that we're looking at. And at the same time, trying to keep those numbers reasonable, you know, so that we can retain a certain quality of life here. So you do have your work cut out for you. Good luck with that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you come back with. This is very intriguing. So thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate your time. Okay, we're going to move along here. Samantha, I've got a question for you. We have, I'm sorry, item number 4. I'm going to have to recuse myself from that. So if we can juggle the schedule here a little bit, we may want to go straight to your comments, and then I can bow out, and you can, and we'll turn it over to Jingbo and proceed with the meeting. How does that sound?
Yeah, before we move on, Chair, if I may, I believe we were going to see if there was any public comments on item 2 before we move forward. So.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Norman. This is Senior Planner Matt Chen. I just confirmed with our assistant Jackie Wang. We didn't receive any public comment for the housing element item.
Okay, then we will close the public comment portion for that item. Thank you, Norma. If it's not written down in front of me, then even if it is, I'll probably miss it. Okay, so Samantha, you wanna step in?
Yes, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Thank you very much for staff comments this evening. Staff wanted to provide the Planning Commission an update on the Blossom Market Hall project, again located at 264 South Mission Drive, north of the Mission Playhouse. The building is anticipated to be open to the public in the summertime of this year. And as a reminder to the Commission and to the public, the project is a complete interior renovation of a 1949 Masonic lodge and will include a 13-vendor food hall. The Planning Commission approved the conditional use permit on December of 2018 to allow for share parking, on-site beer and wine sales, and live entertainment. The project is required to provide 16 parking spaces and to execute an agreement for off-site parking spaces for employee use. And as part of their conditions of approval, a staggered hours of operation was included as part of the business plan to address any potential traffic concerns. In consideration of the impacts of the pandemic to retail and commercial businesses and to an already largely dormant mission district and in business-friendly practices under the city's 10-point plan for recovery, resiliency, and reinvestment, a temporary 9-month pilot program will be tested for the site that offers some flexibility to the original conditions of the project. The pilot program will first provide a temporary hold on the staggered business hours. So far, almost all of the vendor stalls have been leased. However, the owners are having difficulty filling out the last stall within the space that can successfully operate with all the other vendors. And the temporary hold will allow the food hall to fill this last stall, which is an important component to the success of the overall food hall during this first year of operation. Under the original conditions, most of the vendors could be open midday, but more than half would have to be closed during the evening hours. And this is a lost opportunity to attract evening and nighttime visitors to the Mission District, which tends to be less active during the weekday evenings and on weekends. This pilot program is by no means suggesting a permanent change to the hours of operation. And second, the Community Development Department has reviewed and approved a temporary outdoor business permit for the use of the parking lot for outdoor dining use. And while the state and Los Angeles County protocols currently allow indoor dining to a certain capacity, staff believes that it is important to have this option in place in case protocols change and allow the business additional on-site dining options. And lastly, designation and use of curbside delivery and app-based delivery or short-term pickup parking spaces will be provided on Mission Drive to alleviate any traffic impacts to the parking lot and to help with the general flow on site. So since the 2018 approval, and especially during the pandemic, business models have shifted, and these types of changes are necessary to the operations of businesses. And a thriving food hall can help to attract attention to the Mission District and to attract new businesses to the city of San Gabriel, which aligns with the economic development goals for the area. And as the city shifts towards post-pandemic and less restrictive tiers, this is the time to welcome and to open businesses and to give new businesses in particular an opportunity to survive and to succeed, again, post-pandemic conditions. The pilot program will allow some flexibility to test slightly relaxed conditions and to have a formal review 9 months from this time period after opening to review and then to solicit direction from the Planning Commission to see if some or maybe of all the pilot programs may work and to consider permanent modifications to the conditions of approval. And this will be through the public hearing process. And the intent behind the pilot program, again, is to offer business-friendly options and to support new business models in San Gabriel that has the potential to meet the economic development goals of revitalizing the Mission District, attracting visitors and tourists, and change the business landscape of the area. And as Blossom Market is anticipated to open again in summer of 2021, staff will schedule an update with the Planning Commission in spring of 2022. and in consideration of the impacts of the ongoing pandemic. The pilot program, again, is a test and will allow staff and the applicant to vet the relaxed conditions and programs, again, in support of the businesses. And of course, if any concerns or issues arise during this pilot program, staff and the applicant will address them immediately and not wait for this 9-month review period mark. So this concludes staff's comments for this item. This update has been provided to the City Council as well. But staff wanted to take this opportunity to provide the Planning Commission with an update as the business gets ready to launch for their opening again in the next few months. And this concludes staff's comments.
Great, thank you, Samantha. That's good news that they're moving ahead with that. That's great. Okay, Norma, is there anything that we need to do before I step away?
Yeah, we just want to note for the record that, as the chair mentioned, he does have a conflict of interest related to this item and will be recusing himself. Chair, you're welcome at this time to state for the record what the conflict is, or I'm happy to do that on your behalf.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. It's right across the street. So actually not right across the street, but down and around. And it's literally less than a 9-iron. So anyway, proximity to the development is the reason I need to step away. So thank you.
Yeah, just for the benefit of the public, government code does state that a conflict arises and a public official may not participate in a government decision when they own property within 500 feet of a proposed project. And it's deemed to be a material financial interest, as in this case. So, so in this case, Chair Clearwater, if you're going to invite Vice Chair to take over and finish the meeting, chairing the meeting.
Yes, I will turn the gavel over to Jingbo and you can finish things up for us. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Tom. You have a good night.
All right, good night.
All right. We're going to the item number 4, project review. It is 508 West Las Tunas Drive, planning case NOS TMAP 21-001, tentative parcel map CUP 21-001, conditional use permit, and MOD 21-001, minor modifications. So I'm gonna hand it over to the planning staff, who is presenting.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Vice.
Yes, Matt, before you start, if we can get a confirmation that Commissioner Juarez is still present for the meeting.
Yeah, we seem to have lost Commissioner Juarez, which means we've lost quorum. So hopefully he's coming right back.
Oh, I see he's back. I thought.
Oh, there we go. Great.
Okay, very good. We wanted the record to reflect that Commissioner Juarez is back online. Thank you.
Matt?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Liu. Before I start, can I get our Assistant City Attorney Norma just for since the project itself is going to be a project preview. What that means is there's no decision making for this particular item. It's more provide information to the commissions. So staff would like to have a city attorney kind of provide a little bit kind of do's and don'ts, I guess you can say, before I start presenting this project. Norma, could you help us out? Thank you.
No, definitely. Yeah, I just wanted to remind the commissioners that, yes, this is an information item and a project preview, and you are welcome to ask questions, clarifying questions, and have comments. But we want to try to keep things as neutral as possible since we're not making a decision today and we don't want to color or, show that we might have already be predisposed one way or another. So just a reminder that at this point it's informational, but again, it doesn't mean you can't ask questions or have comments, but let's try to keep it as neutral as possible, please.
Clarifying question.
Mhm.
So we can raise issues, it's a question. Can we raise issues of a general nature that would apply? Let's say we perceive something about this project and we want to ask for clarification, or we want to consider it, want to make a statement about it as an issue that could apply to other projects as well. Or are we staying, 10 feet pole, distance, or we don't even want to raise any issues, even if we perceive some?
You're welcome to raise issues. And again, it's general type of issues that you say, oh, you might want to consider this, or I noticed this. That's fine, as opposed to, oh, it's clear that this is going to be a parking problem in this area. So just to give you an example of how you would want to raise issues.
So it's how we state it is important. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Liu and members of the commission. The item before you tonight is a project preview for a proposed medical office building at 50A West Las Tunas Drive. The subject case entitlement for this project will be involving tentative parcel map 21-001, conditional use permit, CUP, and also modification or minor modification, MOD. If you can go to the next slide, please. The subject site is at the southwest corner of Las Tunas Drive and Santa Anita Street. The project site itself is comprised of 7 parcels. And the project itself will kind of combine the 7 parcels to construct a 5-story medical office building. Next slide, please. Just to provide the Planning Commission a background, back in December of 2016, Planning Commission and Design Review Commission at that time approved a similar 5-story medical office building at this locations. And back in December of 2019, those entitlements were expires. And what that means, the applicant will need to apply for a new application, go through the hearing process again. So earlier this year, in January, a new applicant and a new property owner as well filed a new application kind of requesting a very similar project of 5-story medical office building with parking structures. And this project went before Design Review Commission a couple of weeks ago as a preview item to solicit design, architectural feedback, architectural design feedback from the Design Review Commissions. So based on that feedback, the applicant is in process of updating the plans based on the DRC comments. And the purpose of today's meeting is for the applicant to present some of the changes to the Planning Commission in order to continue make a refinement, making a progress to eventually kind of bring it back to the Planning Commission meetings. Next slide, please. Like staff mentioned before, the project is a 5-story medical office building, and the square footage is about 98,000 square feet. The previous approval project that Planning Commission approved back in 2016 was a much larger project. That project is like 120,000 square feet. Some of the detailed information are in your staff report, so you can see some of the number differences. And the project itself will include a 4-story parking structure with 2 basement levels. The project also combines 7 parcels to kind of make 1 medical office building. The project also includes parking reduction as well as floor area ratio, which is FAR reductions. Next slide, please. The project requires the following entitlement application, which is the tentative parcel map to combine the 7 parcels into 1 parcel. conditional use permit that for the parking reduction up to 20% of the parking reductions. Minor modification is for up to 20% of floor area ratio or FAR reduction. Precise plan of design is a building, architectural, as well as landscaping design of the projects. So the project will require all this entitlement applications. The Planning Commission will get to review and approve tentative parcel map, conditional use permit, as well as minor modification. If the Planning Commission approve this project later on, and the project still need to go to Design Review Commission for precise plan of design for the architectural element of the building before the project go to building plan check and construction. Next slide, please. In conclusion, staff is recommending the commission just to receive and file the staff report. Staff would like to point out that the applicant has provided a very thorough PowerPoint presentation right after this one, and staff, the applicant will kind of walk the project with the commissioner, kind of go through all the changes or the history, provide kind of storytelling what the project is about, and also some of the changes they made since the design review commissions. So there will be another PowerPoint presentation for this particular project. And this concludes staff's presentation, and staff is ready for any question.
I have a question. So the FAR reduction, that means it's less dense than the previously approved CUP?
Yes, the current project, it is much smaller in terms of the medical office building square footage, as well as the parking structure square footage. But however, the reason the applicant is requesting the minor modification for FAR is because staff member was back in 2019, was a couple of years ago. Cities, we update the FAR requirement and also regulations. And what we did is we include the parking structure square footage as part of the FAR calculations. So what happened is we don't count the basement parking, but we count the 4-story. If it's a covered parking, we count it included as part of FAR calculation. Whereas back in 2016, those 4-story parking structure wasn't included. That's the big change.
Got it.
Regarding so in retrospective, the project is smaller. However, they're requesting FAR reduction. So
I understand. That's a very good a step forward. I had that issue when I first joined the board of not counting that parking structure as part of the FAR. That regarding of a large massing increase where you're not even recognized by FAR. So that was I think that it's very nice to hear it. Anybody else has comments? Mark, you're mute.
Yes. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. When this project was originally proposed, the calculation for FAR was based on the square footage of the entire project, including the garage?
So
the parking structure?
So not when the project was presented back in 2016. So back in 2016, the FAR calculation was only including the medical office building. The parking structure wasn't part of it.
And now we went the other way. Now we are including the parking structure. Okay.
Correct.
And so they're requesting relief from that change. Is that a correct statement?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're asking for.
How many parking spaces would be required if that relief were not? Am I getting too specific, council? Okay.
Laura, you're mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you're okay.
All right. What are we talking about in terms of the number of the difference in parking spaces required?
So they're requesting two waiver of the code. One is the conditional use permit, CUP, that
Mhm.
covers the number of parking spaces. And the other item is the minor modification, which is talk about the FAR waiver. So
My-
two items.
My question is numerically, how many spaces are required under current code? And how many spaces are required in the old way?
The calculation of the parking space is still the same. So they still require, I think staff members, one parking space for every 250 square feet. So the parking calculation is still the same, just that the building size is different. And
That's okay. So we're speaking two different languages here somehow. My question is, are we granting? Maybe I misread it. We're not granting anything. That's right. Is there a request for a reduced FAR?
yes.
Okay. So what's the difference between the lower number and the bigger number? What is the difference numerically?
So, Matt, if I can jump in really quickly, if staff understands the question correctly. So the project that was previously approved in 2016 was for a larger square footage. So Matt, if you can provide the number of parking spaces that was required for that project. And then under the current square footage of 98,000, what is the required number of parking space? Is that correct, Commissioner Juarez?
That's what I know. Yeah.
Okay.
What are they requesting? I guess is what.
Okay.
If
staff can have
I'd like to know what I'm
if
agreeing
staff
to.
can have a brief moment to look that up, Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay. And you know what? We don't necessarily have to know this tonight or this moment. When we do get this as an agenda item, it would be good to know that. I get that not every number I request is right there handy. You know, it's just something I want to raise. That's all. Okay.
Mark, I think.
So noted, and that's something that the applicant can potentially address as well when they provide their presentation.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, I think what I understand of this request is that even the overall size of the project has been reduced, but under the current, the current FAR calculations is higher than what is permitted by the site, because now we're counting the parking as part of the FAR calculations. But back in 2016, with that old way of calculating that the FAR, that was less. So that's a difference between the 2016's FAR calculations to today's FAR calculations. I guess that's what the applicant is saying.
Yeah, I completely understand that. It's always, in my opinion, just like with population, it's always helpful to quantify when possible, makes it more concrete, more real, and then make the decision. At least for me, that's the way I look at things. Not everyone's that way, but that's why.
I think this is a good thing that qualifies as an issue that's been identified that will be brought back when it's time to actually make a decision.
Thank you.
Keep it at that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gary?
So
Yeah, the page 3 of the staff report says 339 parking spaces.
Yes, I see that. I have that sheet open. I just don't know what the other number is.
Yes, I'll start just did some calculation. So for the previous project, the one that expired, that
Difference
project
requires two numbers. Yeah.
yes. So the previous project, the project got expired. That project requires 497 spaces based on the square footage. So
There we
for
go.
this project,
Okay.
so
Thank
for
you.
this project, this project requires 393 spaces. So 100 parking space less.
339.
93. And the applicant is providing 339.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So 339 is the one they're providing, proposed to provide. So still, they're requesting a waiver of the code, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
I don't really have any questions at this point. I'm interested in hearing from the developer at this time.
All right, next is applicant for,
Richard,
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm here.
go ahead. Sorry.
Are you able to start our PowerPoint?
yes, please.
All right, so if we're on our first slide, Matt or Jessica.
Jessica, can you put the applicant's PowerPoint slide up? Slide number 1. Yes, it is up, Richard. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Jessica, you can go to slide 2. Hello and good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Richard Hale with the Hale Corporation. I am the general contractor and owner's representative for the project. Tonight with me is the project architect, Gary Whitfield with Gory Whitfield Architects. Also on the phone and viewing the YouTube video is the property ownership, Fortune Medical. Next slide, please. Slide 3. Tonight we are presenting 508 West Los Tunis Drive. The project is known as San Gabriel Medical Office Building. The project is located on the southwest corner of Los Tunis and Santa Anita. On the east side of the project is the 5-story San Gabriel Valley Medical Center, the premier hospital serving your community, and to the south is the 4-story San Gabriel Valley Medical Plaza located at 207 Santa Anita. The project consists of a 5-story medical office building, 98,012 square feet. The ground floor will be a mix of retail and open-air, fast and casual restaurants. All parking will be on-site inside a 4-story parking structure with 2 levels of subterranean parking levels of 125,360 square feet. The medical building height is 70 feet. The parking structure height is 47 feet 5 inches. We will be providing 339 parking stalls, which will include the specified accessible parking stalls, car charging stations, and clean air vehicle stalls. Next slide. The following entitlements will be required: a tentative parcel map merging of the 7 parcels into 1 parcel, same as the previously approved project. A conditional use permit parking reduction up to 20%, same as the previously approved project. We will be utilizing the transit accessibility reduction factor of, Jessica, next slide, please. We will be utilizing the transit accessibility reduction factor of 20% reduction in parking. The bus stop across the street is serviced by Metro Local 78 and Metro Express 487. This was confirmed with the Metro timetable. There is a bus that stops at the Santa Anita and Los Tunis intersection every 15 to 30 minutes during the morning and afternoon peak hours. This was also confirmed by the traffic consultant KOA and also provided to the city planner Matt Cheng. We'll also have request a minor modification for the FAR reduction of up to 20% and a precise plan of design for the building architectural design, same as previously approved project. Next slide, please. Slide 6. On this slide coming up before you will be the rendering we proposed and submitted to the DRC on March 22nd, 2021. At this point, I would like to provide some additional background of our project. The project was originally submitted and approved by the DRC and the Planning Commission in 2016. Furthermore, the project completed the plan check process and was permit ready. Unfortunately, the project was not constructed. Since that time, the project has undergone new ownership, design team, and leadership. The new project before you will be thoughtfully enhanced and has taken into account the previously approved conditions of approval and gone further to make this legacy project for the medical community. Here are some of the improvements made since the project was originally approved in 2016. We have a smaller footprint than the originally approved project. We reduced the footprint by 1,785 square feet. We have a smaller square footage than the originally approved project. We reduced the building's area square footage by 63,958 square feet. The project is zoned Medical Facilities, MF, and is at the entrance of the Mission District and will become the premier anchor for the medical community. As I mentioned previously, on the east side of the project is San Gabriel Valley Hospital, and to the south is San Gabriel Valley Medical Plaza 207 San Anita. As a result of the smaller project, there are also some additional benefits we have generated. We have reduced our dirt export by 29,731 cubic yards. We have eliminated 17 days of hauling dirt offsite. We have eliminated 2,124 truckloads of dirt export offsite. Additionally, we have reduced the number of concrete loads, shoring days, and most importantly, reduced the overall construction schedule by more than 90 calendar days. We have already completed the following. We have completed the ARS, or the applicant review session, on September 15th. We received feedback October 13th from the fire department, police department, public works, building department, planning, the city architect, Dale Brown. This was followed up with a Zoom call on October 13th with all attending the meeting to discuss the staff comments. Following the meeting, our design team incorporated all of the feedback received from each of the departments. Next, we submitted the planning application package on January 5th of this year. We then received feedback on March 2nd, 2021 from the city architect, Dale Brown. This was followed up with a Zoom call on March 3rd with Dale Brown and Matt Chang attending the meeting to discuss their comments with myself and the design team. Simultaneously, we have begun assembling and completing the Sql documentation and have retained the City of San Gabriel consultant, Placeworks. We have completed the following reports. Traffic report. The initial findings were submitted to Public Works. Subsequently, we had a Zoom call with Public Works and along with the traffic consultants, KOA, to discuss existing and future traffic counts. Our traffic consultant, KOA, provided proposed mitigation measures which were subsequently reviewed and approved by Public Works, which will also include enhanced mitigation measures such as revised striping and modification to signal lights at Los Tunis and San Anita. Our consultants are actively preparing the street improvement plans as well as the traffic signal, signage, and striping plans. The noise study. This report has been completed and determined there are no significant impacts. The air quality greenhouse gas study. This report has also been completed and determined there are no significant impacts. We have completed the first design review commission meeting last month on March 22nd. The DRC reviewed our project on that date and provided feedback and direction. Following the meeting, the design team incorporated all of the DRC feedback items discussed as well as enhanced the overall project to make it a more cohesive community project and better serve the medical community. We will be resubmitting to the DRC later this month on Monday, April 26th. As a follow-up to the DRC meeting, we requested and had a follow-up meeting on Monday, March 29th via Zoom with the design team, myself, Matt Chang, and city architect Dale Brown. We presented the revised site plan and received positive feedback. Matt and Dale did offer a couple more recommendations, which we have included in the set of drawings you are viewing tonight. Next slide, please. On this slide, we're comparing the originally approved project in 2016 versus 2021. On this slide, we would like to show the Commission the originally approved project in 2016 on the top of the screen in comparison to the design we developed and submitted to the DRC on Monday, March 22nd, 2021. Next slide, slide 8. On the screen is what was submitted in 2016 versus 2021, the DRC. Next slide, slide 8. Since the DRC meeting on March 22nd, 2021, our design team has responded to the feedback from the DRC. Additionally, we had Zoom meetings with the case planner, Matt Chang, and city architect, Dale Brown. On this slide is incorporated the feedback and direction from both DRC and Matt Chang, the city architect, Dale Brown. Next slide, slide 9. On this slide, we are comparing the first submittal to DRC and the revised renderings we have now completed. On this slide, you can see how the design team has responded to DRC feedback, the case planner, and the city architect, Dale Brown. The building now offers direct street access to the retail and fast casual restaurants and is at the same level as the street. The second floor has been pulled back for more vertical space at the corner of Las Tunis and Santa Anita. This also provides for greater line of sight visibility for the pedestrians and vehicles. We have added signage opportunities to enhance visibility and visual separation from the medical floors. The food court, which offers fast casual dining for the tenants, hospital, and community, has been enhanced with an open air concept and accessible at the street level. The restaurants will feature nano doors, which will provide an inviting entrance for all visitors. We have also added significant amount of larger and more mature landscaping along both street frontages. Next slide, please. On slide 10, you will see the footprint comparison of 2016 versus 2021. The medium gray color you see on the screen is the footprint of the 2016 approved project. The yellow and black crosshatch lines represent the footprint of the project we are submitting before you tonight. The building footprint has been repositioned to create greater setback from Las Tunas Drive, Santa Anita Street, and Padilla. The increased setback has also created greater line of sight visibility at the corner of Las Tunas and Santa Anita, as I mentioned earlier. Additionally, we have repositioned the footprint to increase the side yard setback from the westerly adjacent commercial building, commonly known as Newport Seafood Restaurant. We have increased this setback by an additional 10 feet. Next slide, slide 11. On slide 11, you will find our site plan. We feature both retail space along Las Tunas and fast casual dining restaurants on Santa Anita Street. The project is served with a parking structure for 339 vehicles. Visitors will enter the structure on Padilla Road. The original design that was approved by the City and Public Works included ingress and egress driveways on Santa Anita, or my apologies, it was along the ingress and egress driveway on Las Tunas. We have created an ingress-only driveway for deliveries and have also pulled the driveway back 20 feet from the corner intersection. This will eliminate any traffic entering back onto Las Tunas. On this slide, we provide screenshots showing how the fast casual dining will be street level and offer great outdoor dining experience. Additionally, you will see inspiration photos on the far right side of the slide, which further demonstrate how the indoor-outdoor dining will be inviting to the medical community and residents of San Gabriel. On our site plan, on the bottom of the slide, we also graphically show the street closure at Padilla Road. It is a landscape buffer with an elevated emergency vehicle curb, identical to the one that was approved and conditioned with the original project in 2016. Next slide, please. On slide 12, this is the architectural elevation of Las Tunas and Santa Anita Street. On the elevation, we also are sheet, we also include a sampling of the materials that will be utilized in the project. It will be a mix of ACM metal, non-reflective silver color panels, horizontal metal panels with wood grain, clear glass, non-vision white spandrel glass, which will be located between the different floors. EPIS with smooth texture at multiple locations with either a walnut, terracotta, or white color. On the Las Tunis elevation, we provide reference to the adjacent buildings outline, which include Newport Seafood Restaurant and a 2-story office building. The parking structure sits back from Las Tunis 212 feet, 6 inches, or just over 70 yards, or 3/4 of a football field. Next slide. On slide 13, this slide is Padilla and the west side of the medical office building. The parking structure follows the architectural design of the project and includes decorative panels to provide natural ventilation into the parking structure. Next slide. Overall inspirations. Next slide, slide 15. Inspiration photos within the community. We have included inspiration photos that depict the previously approved project, the community hospital across the street, the adjacent medical building, and the colors and textures that can be found within the area. Slide 16. Inspiration photos. These photos include inspiration photos which take into account the city of San Gabriel, but also introducing thoughtful elements that talk to the community colors and textures. We also want to introduce the indoor-outdoor fast casual dining experience for the tenants, hospital community, and the city of San Gabriel residents. Slide 17. Signage for the building and tenants, parking structure, and wayfinding signage. From our meeting with the DRC, we have listened to them and as well as Matt Chang and Dale Brown. They convey that we should begin to develop our signage program. We have begun developing inspiration photos to tell the story to the commission and the community. Next slide, slide 18, please. Signage. On this slide are examples of signage. We are mindful and will further enhance wayfinding signage for the visitors to access not only the building, but the parking structure. We intend to further develop the signage package for everyone's review and approval. The signage program will encompass the building signage, the tenant signage, address, parking structure, and wayfinding. Slide 19. Slide 19 is the public art inspiration. The team has begun the process to developing a public art program. Slide 20, please. Public art inspiration photos. On this slide are examples of public art for the community enjoyment. The team has started the process of identifying the locations within the project for the proposed artwork. We are also now starting to the careful process of identifying the artisans that can design and commission the public art that will deliver the meaningful message at this gateway project into the medical community. Next slide, slide rendering. Now I bring you back to our rendering at the corner of Las Tunis and Santa Anita. Slide 22. Slide 22. And now to conclude at our site plan, which also includes the floor plan of the first floor for your review. In conclusion, thank you for this opportunity to present our project. We look forward to receiving your feedback and constructing this project as the new anchor to the medical community. I am here to answer any questions or provide any clarifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, Any question?
Yeah, I do have one question for Mr. Hale. Are you going to be the party that actually leases out the building as well?
We haven't been retained to do the leasing, no.
Okay, thank you.
Mark? Mark, you're mute. You're muted.
Today is not my computer day. Just a couple of quick questions. Is it planned, and the rest of you probably already know this because you were here when that was first proposed. The parking structure will be, it's open to the public, obviously. I mean, not for free, but I mean, in off hours, it's a public parking structure. Is that how it's proposed? Anybody can answer.
Well, we haven't received any conditions to that extent, but I think previously the original applicant did have a type of an agreement to assist the playhouse with overflow parking.
Okay. Okay. I mean, just for one person's perspective, if that's, because medical uses are primarily during the day, as except for emergency mode, and I would be far more amenable to any proposal that increased available parking to the public. I'm not saying for free. I just mean it's accessible and people can choose a place to park, and because parking is at a premium in that part of the community. So that's just one person's opinion. It looks like a fine addition. It looks like it'll bring relatively decent paying jobs to the area, which supports local businesses. Stop me, council, if I cross the line here. My concern, and it's a minor concern, it looks like it's been addressed to some degree. You've got that green, look, at least it's colored green on the drawing. The buffer between the residential area on the west perimeter and where the traffic barrier is. And
correct.
Again,
I'm sorry.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you nailed it. So it's a landscape buffer between ourselves and the residential component to the west. We're 30-foot setback from that property line. We previously have already developed this isn't the preliminary landscape plan, but our preliminary landscape plan includes very mature solid hedging along that to create a buffer for any visual impact.
That's
what's that?
You say solid edging on that perimeter?
Hedging.
Yes.
Well, we're exploring, but it looks like either a Flatinia hedge or with a root barrier, or a ficus with a root barrier, something that won't be invasive of the new footing, because we will be constructing a new garden wall between the new properties.
Ficus has invasive roots, yes. So that is also something that is of concern to me with any project where in high density residential or commercial, but especially R1 uses and so forth. So you've addressed that. I would simply ask, and we don't need the details right now, where's your mechanical equipment? Is it in that buffer? If it isn't, great. I'm just thinking about speaking for the people of that small residential area. And it looks like you're already thinking about that, which is refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I will make my comments on that. I remember discussion of this project back in 2016. I think one of the discussion we had the most was the buffer zone between this building and the R1 residential building next to it. And so I also have the same question and same question as Mark. And is how do you use the buffer zones? Is that used as a loading zones, or how is that a early morning the traffic or noise generations or trash collections? How is that going to be affect in general to the R1 zone when you're adjacent to a high density development? That's a very valid point, and we always I always think that's important. I guess do we have we don't have a public comments for this discussion, right, Norma?
Commissioner, would you like me to answer your question or your comment?
Sure, yes, yeah.
I just want to kind of clarify for you. So that that gray line you see there, that is only for, we have two of our transformers there in the side yard, but they'll be buffered with landscape. We have to provide a road for, in the future if they ever have to switch out the switchgear or the transformer. But we have our long-term bike lockers that you see kind of a cross-hatched straight ahead. So that's our long-term bike storage lockers for the employees of the building. So that we will not have any deliveries there. Our trash comes off our ingress driveway off of Las Tunas. The trash truck would come off of Las Tunas and come through to the building, and it's tucked under in a concealed trash enclosure. So the trash enclosure isn't exposed to the outdoor elements, or if there were perhaps homeless or people jumping into the trash, it is a locked-in trash enclosure.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, just to address your question, Vice Chair, no, there is no public comments. It's not a public hearing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Norma, and thank you for the applicants. I think that's I have a question on the transformers. You're talking about a switchgear and transformer. Is that the main transformers on grade? Is there so just keep in mind, I assume that it's all been considered. There's a safety issues to that. There's could be some requirements for placing a transformer, large transformer next to a residential components or property next door. So just in my mind.
Great question. We've had our meetings with Southern California Edison, and we've actually begun working on the red line drawings, and that was the exact same location it was in 2016 when the project was originally approved, and so we were able to reutilize that. We do have the setbacks. It's screened behind a wall on the west property line, and it's screened from the street. So there'll be actually a solid rolling gate, approximately 25 feet back from the street frontage. So they'll be buffered behind the wall and won't be visible.
Thank you. I don't have any other comments, and assume that's concluded this item. And is there any other staff items we need to talk?
No, Vice Chair and members of the Commission, there are no other staff items. Vice Chair, you can move on to item number 5 if there are no other comments on item number 4, which is 508 Las Tunas.
So I move on to
Thank you.
is that to move to a receive and a file report. Is there yeah? I'll move to the next items. Is it it's no voting, right? It's just yes and no to file, receive and filed report.
Yes,
Norma? Matt?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair.
right.
So for the 508, just receive and file, kind of listen to the PowerPoint presentation and answer questions, and that'll be end of the item. That's it. There's no
right.
vote for this.
We'll just do it as you said. And then we can adjourn the Planning Commission meeting to the next regular meeting.
Vice Chair, we still have item number 5, which is commission comments, conference reports.
Oh, sorry, matter, okay. All right, I thought we did the item number, item 94, commissioner comments and conference meeting reports. Each commissioners may address the commission on matters of general information and or concerns. This is also the time for commissioners to report on conferences and the meetings they have attended. Commissioners? I hear none, so we'll close this item. Then we can join the meeting. Oh, the next meeting is on May. I'm trying to look at the things. It's May 10th. Okay. Well, it's joined to the next commissioners buildings meetings on May 10th. Adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone. Good night.